Okay, we're gonna try to get through this. I'm not gonna lie to you guys. It is 1,000,000 degrees here in New York City, and yeah, I had to turn off all of the cooling units in this particular recording space because if I don't, you'll be able to hear everything. And I still feel like you can probably hear something because I hear something very strange right now going on outside, but hopefully that stops. I don't know if I should close the window or not. I think we're okay. You guys not hear that?
What is that?
So loud. So loud. All right, we're just gonna go for it because take 1055. Here we go. Hey everybody, and welcome back to another installment of Digging in the Crates, a series proudly brought to you by the Melanated Archives. I'm your host, Kendra Touche, or just Kendra, the creator of the Melanated Archives and the Melanated Archives podcast. And today, I invite you into this space, this place, this moment where we get to set adulting aside and release those everyday stresses and take a journey back onto one of the most magical, heartwarming, fictional neighborhoods of all time. You know the place that we all grew up knowing how to get to, Sesame Street. And before you say it, let me say it for you. But Kendra, I thought you focused on the history of Black actors on stage and television and all the other stuff that you be talking about. Okay, first of all, if you are seriously asking me that question, I wish you wouldn't. Because Sesame Street was also known, at least to me, as Harlem with puppets. And was beautifully melanated, not just in color, but in spirit. It had cultural richness and the way that it molded what it truly meant to be an American, chef's kiss. In fact, it showed us what the world could look like if we embraced each other fully without judgment and beyond our differences. And there's one particular story that deserves the spotlight. The story of a bold, brilliant puppet boy who lit up the screen as the first Black Muppet on the show. His name was Roosevelt Franklin. And this is his story, and then some. So now let's go ahead and rewind to February 1970, when Sesame Street first introduced Roosevelt Franklin to the neighborhood. Now, side note, you know that my little history brain went into overdrive, right? Because February 1970, that was Black History something. I couldn't help but wonder if his debut was meant to coincide with Black History Month observances at that time or not, but here's what I found out. Although Black History Month wasn't officially recognized nationwide until 1976, back in 1970, a group of students and educators at Kent State University proposed and celebrated it on their campus. That same year, students at Baker Junior High School in Tacoma, Washington, and likely many others across the country followed suit. So while I couldn't pin down the exact date that Roosevelt Franklin first appeared on the show, the timing wasn't random at all. Whether it was intentional or not, Sesame Street's choice to debut a Black puppet during that pivotal moment placed them firmly in alignment with the growing cultural movement, one that continues to shape Black history and media representation to this very day. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and head back east to Sesame Street and dig in even deeper into the legacy of Roosevelt Franklin. Now, Roosevelt Franklin was a magenta-looking Muppet with shaggy Black hair that stood straight up in all of its glory, full of flair and personality, and his name was a clever play on the U.S. President Franklin D. Roosevelt, just flipped around. But when I tried to do a little research as to why he was named after the 32nd president of the United States, all I could find was that for some reason, President Roosevelt was extremely popular at that time. Cricket, cricket. The Muppet Roosevelt Franklin was undoubtedly cool. He was confident, sharp, often spoke with rhyme, and he scattered a lot. He was bebop and hip hop before hip hop took over the world. Roosevelt was voiced and created by none other than the legendary Mr. Matt Robinson, who also portrayed Gordon and is the father of the actress Holly Robinson Peete. Now, his character Gordon was one of the original human characters on the show, in which he played the role from 1969 to 1972. Now, Robinson not only gave Roosevelt a voice, but he shaped him into a character who was smart, expressive, and undoubtedly Black, and at a time when Black representation in children's programming was nearly non-existent. But as groundbreaking as Roosevelt Franklin was, his time on the show was cut short. By the mid-1970s, he began appearing less frequently on the show until he quite literally disappeared from the regular cast. And I'm sure that his absence confused many kids and baffled the minds of adults, because how do you explain a Muppet disappearing from a show? It's not like he, walked off the set or something. Anyways, why was such a bright light dimmed so quickly? To understand the full story, we have to break this down into 3 key parts. How Sesame Street came to be, Matt Robinson and the creation of Roosevelt Franklin, and the fallout. The seed for Sesame Street was planted in 1966 when Joan Gans Cooney and Lloyd Morset had a simple but powerful conversation at a dinner party, and it went something like this. What if television, the thing kids were glued to at the time, could be used to educate them, especially those from disadvantaged backgrounds? Now, that simple question led to the creation of the Children's Television Workshop, now Sesame Workshop. And in 1969, Sesame Street was born. Its mission was clear: to prepare preschoolers, particularly from low-income communities, for school through fun, engaging, and educational television. But the story doesn't stop there. And here's the part most people only started talking about in more recent years. Sesame Street wasn't just about ABCs and 1, 2, 3s. It was shaped by a deep social mission heavily inspired by Harlem and other multicultural neighborhoods in the New York City area, places bursting with life, community, struggle, and pride. Its brownstones, fire escapes, and street scenes weren't random designs. They were modeled after real inner city communities, particularly those of Black and brown children. So those kids could turn on the TV and see something that looked like home. This wasn't just creative intuition, it was deeply rooted in the political and cultural movement. And here's the root truth of it all. The show emerged from Lyndon B. Johnson's Great Society, a bold federal initiative to end poverty and racial injustice. As part of the effort, Johnson launched Head Start in 1965, a program aimed at interrupting the cycle of poverty through early education. Joan Gans Cooney said in a documentary that she worked on, she said this about Harlem preschool, that it lit a fire in her. It made her, in her words, intellectually and spiritually invested in the civil rights movement and the educational deficit that poverty created. And in teaming up with Lloyd Morset, a psychiatrist with ties to Carnegie Corporation, they secured both private and federal funding to bring this vision to life. No problem. The Children's Television Workshop wasn't your typical TV studio. It had a board of advisors made up of children psychologists, educators, sociologists, doctors, and artists, many of whom were Black and committed to equity in education and media. Now, this is very similar to the way that Bill Cosby made sure that his set and the script advisors were operating behind the scenes on The Cosby Show. One of the key figures on Sesame Street was Dr. Chester Pierce, a Black psychiatrist and Harvard professor who created the behind-the-scenes educational framework designed to build the self-worth of Black children, which became the show's hidden agenda. Actor Loretta Long, who played Suzanne on the show, devoted a full chapter of her doctoral dissertation. Yes, the Queen was pursuing her doctorate in urban education at the same time that she was filming Sesame Street. What's your excuse? She wrote about the show's hidden curriculum in that dissertation. What came out of it would become 1, 2, 3 Sesame Street. And from day one, Black folks were centered on the show. From a young James Earl Jones reciting the alphabet to musical performances from Mahalia Jackson, Nina Simone, Stevie Wonder, Lena Horne, and so many more people. I mean, the show embraced and celebrated Black artistry and Black excellence and Black joy. It was clear that Sesame Street was built with Black and brown children in mind, not just as viewers, but as the heart of the mission of the show. And with that type of stance, the producers knew they had to go big or go home. From the very beginning, the show's original couple, Gordon and Susan, were played by African-American actors. Many of the crew members were Black. Still, for anyone watching the first season, the real question was, where were the Black puppets? For pretty much all of the puppets on the show, there was always speculation about whether some of them were supposed to be Black. Even Jim Henson himself stated that the only kids who can identify along racial lines with the puppets have to be either green or orange. But that all changed in season 2, when Sesame Street introduced a Muppet whose identity was undeniably Black. And at the center of that creation was actor, writer, producer, and activist Matt Robinson. Robinson was originally tapped for Sesame Street not as an actor, but as a producer tasked with overseeing the film segments of the show. However, when the original actor cast as Gordon didn't quite work out during early tapings, Robinson was encouraged, reluctantly, to step into that role. See, by nature, Robinson was more of a reserved, shy guy who was way more comfortable behind the scenes than he was in front of the scenes. But after being encouraged to step up to the plate, he did just that. Robinson became the first character to speak on the show. Literally. He delivered the first line of the first episode ever. So while helping to shape the show's behind the scenes content, Robinson also began developing a character who could reflect Black culture in puppet form. And that character would become Roosevelt Franklin. And his vibe was so soulful. On the show, Roosevelt Franklin taught his classmates at Roosevelt Franklin Elementary School. He had a baby brother, Baby Ray Franklin, a sister, Mary Frances Franklin, and a mom who was proud of him every step of the way. In fact, in his world, Roosevelt wasn't just a student. He was often a teacher. He taught classes about family and self-respect, Black pride, Africa, traffic safety, geography, math, you name it, he knew it. He even had his own stadium, Roosevelt Franklin Stadium, where he coached a sport called headball. Yep, headball, because why not? Now, Matt Robinson not only voiced Roosevelt Franklin, but he created him from the ground up. And while Jim Henson may have helped shape the puppet's look, the cultural nuances, his humor, and educational style all flowed from Robinson's own mission to ensure that Black children saw themselves not only reflected, but celebrated. In no time at all, Roosevelt Franklin had become so popular that in 1971, he became the first Muppet to release his own album. The album was a funk-infused, message-driven children's album filled with songs, rhythm, and joy, and the songs were written by none other than Matt Robinson and Sesame Street's resident musical genius, Joe Raposo. And in the early 1970s, his popularity rivaled even Big Bird and Oscar the Grouch. But as we know, Roosevelt Franklin eventually disappeared from the neighborhood. Despite his popularity, some educators and critics raised concerns. Some said that his classroom antics created too much chaos. Now, these critiques, along with broader debates about respectability policy and what kind of Blackness was acceptable in children's television, led the character to slowly being phased out by 1975. Still, for so many of us, Roosevelt Franklin was more than a puppet. He was a bold and rhythmic, unapologetically Black force. And his absence, as well as his presence on Sesame Street, they both left lasting marks. As for Matt Robinson, well, he left the show in 1972, but he continued to work behind the scenes, both scripting and voicing Roosevelt Franklin until 1974. It's said that his departure from the show wasn't due to any controversy, but because he chose to pursue other opportunities in screenwriting and other creative endeavors. I want to dig into some of the criticism that surrounded the puppet at the time. So allegedly, and I do emphasize allegedly, because while Roosevelt Franklin was embraced by the cast and crew, he didn't necessarily resonate the same way with viewers at home. According to some reports, Black parents were among those who took issue with the character. The concern was that Roosevelt Franklin represented a caricature of Blackness. It stated that many believed that he would encourage children to lean into those stereotypes rather than to rise above them. So that sparked a debate about how to represent culture authentically without reinforcing quote unquote harmful tropes. But here's the thing, that's only one version of the story. When I talk to my family members and people who watched Sesame Street during that time, they love Roosevelt. I mean, you know, he was the man. And many remember him fondly. They remember laughing and learning and loving his presence. And for those of us born after his prime, there's even a sense of loss. Like, I wish that we'd been there to witness this confident, energized puppet in the 90s. And this is why doing your own research matters, because market research surveys or focus groups from that time may not even tell the whole story. They may not even tell the whole truth, because there's a very real possibility that the criticism that Roosevelt received was completely blown out of proportion, or even used as an excuse to quietly remove a Black character who was too Black, too bold, too different for mainstream comfort and or investors on the show. Do your research, y'all. Do your research. And I say that because let's not forget, Roosevelt Franklin was on that show for 7 full seasons. Check. That's not a blink of time. That's not, you know, a one-off. That's staying power. So I ask you, did America really become more racist between season 1 and season 7? Or did the people behind the scenes start getting nervous about a puppet who was doing too much, too loudly? I don't know, but something in the milk ain't clean. Or was that Black enough for you? For all his joy, confidence, and cultural richness, Roosevelt Franklin didn't leave Sesame Street quietly. His fall from favor was gradual, complex, and depending on who you ask, either justified or deeply unfortunate. His segments continued airing well into the 1980s, and he lived on in Sesame Street storybooks through 1996. He also appeared in a few blink and you'll miss it cameos from time to time. And as for his creator, Matt Robinson, he continued to showcase his brilliant work elsewhere. Now, after Sesame Street, he wrote for landmark shows like Sanford and Son, The Waltons, Ed Is Enough, and eventually joined the writing and producing team for The Cosby Show. And that is why I said at the beginning, I wanted to remind people that The Cosby Show also had this thing going on behind the scenes where they hired a lot of Black psychiatrists and Black mental health specialists and doctors, so on and so forth, to come and advise on the show. It was a common thread between The Cosby Show and Sesame Street to kind of use that influence of real life people behind the scenes. And it makes me think maybe Matt Robinson had something more to do with the creation and the overall flow of these shows than what he's given credit for. So, I don't know. I have a theory that Matt Robinson played a much more intricate part in the creation of Sesame Street. Just believe in Matt Robinson. Anyways, back to the story. Matt Robinson was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease in 1982 at just 45 years young. He battled it for 2 decades until his passing in 2002 at the age of 65. His legacy, both as an artist and as a cultural truth teller, lives on and is widely seen through his daughter, actress and activist Holly Robinson Peete. And it's through her and her family that Roosevelt Franklin would make a triumphant return to Sesame Street. Roosevelt made his first full speaking appearance in decades in Meet the Peetes when Holly Robinson Peete and her brother, Matt Robinson III, visited the Sesame Street set. And Roosevelt has been popping up in different places ever since. Even right here on YouTube, because you can click on different videos and make sure that you go out and watch him a little bit, but only after you finish this episode of Digging the Crates. Now, in researching this episode, I came across a quote that really hit me about Roosevelt being a forgotten Black power icon. And that's exactly what he was when you think about it, because when you look at his journey, his rise, his cultural impact, and his eventual removal, you begin to see something deeply familiar. Roosevelt's story mirrors that of the Black experience in America almost to a T. Like, first, you're celebrated and sought after because your presence adds value and helps to sell inclusion, checks a box, or brings in a new audience. You're needed, basically, because the culture demands it, or because the folks in power realize they need you to stay relevant. Then the second your presence becomes too big or too complex or too bold or even just too loud for their comfort, you're cut down. And in Roosevelt's case, erased from the very street he helped make cool. And here's where the excuse just doesn't sit right with me. The claim that Roosevelt was too disorderly and set a bad example. I mean, come on, y'all. There was Oscar the Grouch, and he was a literal grump who lived in a trash can and constantly shaded people walking around him every single day. And nobody called for Oscar to be pulled from the show or encouraging rudeness. Why? Because, we understood that kids know the difference between fantasy and reality when it's framed properly, especially with supportive adults around them. And that's the whole point of children's programming with moral lessons. You give kids credit for having the capacity to think critically. And Roosevelt Franklin was never just a Muppet. He was a mirror, a challenge, a celebration. He was created by a Black man who refused to play small, voiced by a Black man who filled his words with pride and protest, written into existence at a time when Blackness on screen was still negotiable. His rise and fall are lessons in visibility, perception, and power. His return, a reminder that what is authentic, joyful, and unapologetic may fade, but it never truly dies. Roosevelt Franklin was Sesame Street. He is Black history, and this was his story. And that's our show. That's our episode. If you enjoyed this video, and I hope that you did, make sure that you hit all the buttons down below, the like, the subscribe, the bell icon, and hit that little bell icon so that you are notified whenever I drop something new. And don't just hit the dislike button. Please don't do that. And while you're at it, follow us across all of our social media platforms. We stay shining a light on the legends and icons and the untold stories of Black actors and creatives in TV, film, theater, and puppetry. And speaking of puppetry, don't forget to check out the Melanated Archives podcast. In our very first season, we actually did an entire episode that was dedicated to the history of Black puppetry. And we highlighted some incredible and iconic puppeteers and legends on that show, both newer and, some of the seasoned ones as well. So we're gearing up now for season 3, but we need to know that you are listening and that you're paying attention and that this is content that you really want. So make sure that you go and you catch up on seasons 1 and 2 of the Melanated Archives podcast. Link in the description below. And as always, remember this. Melanated isn't just a skin tone, it is a mindset. And as long as you can see in color, you have the ability to appreciate, respect, and connect with the beautiful shades and stories that shape our world. Y'all stay safe, stay youthful, and stay free. And stay cool too, because it's hot as hell. Woo! Jeez. Until next time, y'all, peace and coolness. I'm about to turn back on this AC. Glad that we got through it, y'all, and I'll edit it and see where we go from here. All right. Peace, family. I'm out.